Their faces are certainly more familiar now, but a mere matter of months ago, our Ontario hubs were brand new to TVO. So before we ring in a new year, let's find out what their favorite stories were and what they're planning for us in 2018. And for that, we welcome, from our studio at Confederation College in Thunder Bay, John Thompson, who heads our Northwest Ontario hub. From our studio at Western University in London, Mary Baxter, who heads our Southwest Ontario hub. And here in the studio, Jayan Jagannathan, our Ontario Hub's field producer, and for him, the whole province of Ontario is his oyster.
That's right.
You just go everywhere. Jayan, good to see you again, and our two friends in Points Beyond. Delighted to have you on again on this Friday night. Jayan, I want to start with you. I want to just play a snippet of a promo for a report that you filed back in November, then we'll chat about that, okay?
Right.
Sheldon, fire away.
We are in an old Target location, which is a major shopping center within Hamilton.
The Right on Target project hosted 5 pop-ups throughout the summer, each one featuring various events with the goal of drawing locals back to the building.
Hammer City Roller Derby is hosting a roller derby bout. Steel City Studios is running and hosting a maker's market. Smith & Patel is running a live art showcase. And a lot of the different groups you see here, they have no home. We loosen the rules around what could occupy a big box store.
You just have to come to one of the events and you see how this derelict building has become a vibrant community center literally overnight. Like if you came here yesterday morning, it was empty, it was dusty. There's a bunch of people just hanging around. And now, you know, if you look over there, it's a community.
That's a nice way to put it. It's a community. Love to see good, exciting things happening in our hometown, the Hammer.
There you go.
What do we need to know about Right on Target?
So the Right on Target was initially a feasibility study, consisted of 5 pop-up shows in Hamilton's East End. If you've been there, it's kind of an empty area. I've driven by it many times before I knew about this. It's kind of an empty area, lots of families there. This event has kind of turned into, the main goal was, what do we do with big box stores that are empty, and how can we transform that into something that the community can use? And so now that we look at it, after these 5 events, I can tell you there's been a number of events. They just wrapped up a holiday event, and they have a bunch more for the new year.
Repurposing some of this old space that was just sitting there doing nothing.
Exactly.
I am told that you are particularly proud of this video. How come?
Not only because it's in Hamilton, but this particular piece did really well on social media. But I was filtering through the comments and just kind of going through, and a lot of people could relate to this. You know, big box stores have been closing across Ontario and across Canada. You know, I had comments from people who were in Orillia and Brockville, in Bracebridge, talking about, I wish we had, you know, entrepreneurs who were doing something like this in our area. You know, in smaller towns, the big box store is the place to go. And once those shut down, you don't really have that community environment. So seeing people, you know, being able to relate to a story that I was able to show and maybe potentially give some ideas to people, I think that's extremely proud to be part of.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the fact is this story takes place in Hamilton, and you are from Hamilton, and I wonder if that helped.
Well, not originally from Hamilton, lived there now for the last 4 years. So I can tell you, one of the things that I've learned is since I've moved there, a lot of young people, a lot of families, lots of artists, and there is, you know, like I've said, I've driven by this place many times. I've seen an empty parking lot. It's like, what's going on? Didn't know this hub of action was going inside, but I knew there was this group of artists, a core group of artists who were looking for spaces like this. And so I think that helped me once our producer, Katie, put us in touch with this store, and I was like, this is an amazing thing. It's in my backyard. Let's go check it out. And I think knowing that there was people who needed this space, I think that helped me tell this story, and it was an important story.
I maintain Hamilton's one of the best-kept secrets in this province. Less of a best-kept secret because the word is getting out. But if all you know of that city is what you see going over the Skyway Bridge, you are missing so much. Anyways, and you confirm that, obviously. Good. Thanks, Jan, for setting that up for us. Let's move on to Southwest Ontario, and this is a much tougher story. And to start with, Mary, I am going to read an excerpt of what you wrote on our website, tvo.org, about, you know, the dark side of Canada's prettiest town. Here we go. Nearly 3 years ago, Jordan Bartasek stared down a bottle of whiskey and contemplated ending things for good. The one-time odd-job contractor who lived with his father in Fordwich, Huron County, an hour-and-a-half's drive north of London, had spent the past 2.5 years sober. But lately, he'd been plagued by thoughts of suicide. Quote, I lost passion for a lot of things, Bartasek, now 40, recalls. He turned once again to the numbing combination of booze and pills that had been his companion during his 20s and early 30s, before he kicked the habit at a rehab center in Guelph. Relief followed, but he soon found himself spiraling out of control. Mary, let's try to understand what Jordan's story says about a potentially bigger picture in Huron County. What do you think?
Well, Steve, for a lot of people, when I first started this story, I was going in and looking for perhaps issues to do with opioid addiction, and discovered instead that Huron County was dealing with a number of challenges in terms of addiction, including a lot of drinking and mixing booze with pills and that sort of thing. So Jordan's story was really typical in that way. And another thing was that it's a real challenge when you're in a rural area like Huron County to try to get help. People are often really isolated, and it can be maybe a half an hour's drive into a place like Goderich to be able to get counseling or even to seek medical help.
Of all the stories you covered this past year, this is the one you chose to focus on tonight. Why did this story, for you, stand out so much?
Well, stories like these are very, very tough stories to do. Communities typically don't want to talk about those tough issues. They can be very hard for people to talk about and also to hear about, but it's very important to discuss these things and get them out into the open so solutions can be found. And what I heard with the Huron County story was that it really did have an impact on the community. People were shocked. They were shocked to hear about levels of drinking in the county, for instance. And so it also helped to foster some discussion. And actually, before the story came out, probably about, I think, 2 months before it came out, there was a family who they'd lost their son to addiction, and they were working on establishing a foundation to try to build some resources in the county. And it was after our story ran that they announced to the county some of their intentions, which included to establish a treatment facility for youth, something that's definitely needed in that area.
Once you had the story posted to our website, I wonder whether you got any official reaction from anybody in Huron County.
I never received official reaction myself, but certainly it did appear in at least one newspaper's editorial, a reference to the story.
Good to know. All right, let's go to Northwestern Ontario. And John, we're going to put your work under the microscope right now. This is you writing earlier this summer about a crisis after all. In January, a 34-year-old Anishinaabe woman, Barbara Kentner, was struck by a trailer hitch thrown from a passing vehicle. This week, Kentner died from her injuries. But although her story was picked up by the national media, First Nations people facing danger in Thunder Bay is nothing new. The city's manager, mayor, police board chair, and one of its members of parliament have not used the word crisis to describe the public's deepening mistrust in the city's institutions, preferring to couch it in less evocative terms. However, a growing chorus of residents believe this constitutes a failure of the city to be accountable and confront systemic racism. John, why have people started questioning Thunder Bay's institutions?
The institutions were under scrutiny by members of the public for years, but what changed in late 2016 and 2017 was there was an institutional response that seemed to justify the concerns and the questions that weren't answered. So there was an inquest into the deaths of 7 youth from remote First Nations who died while attending high school in Thunder Bay, and that inquest was more or less inconclusive. And then when 2 more children from remote First Nations were found dead in the river that runs through town in May within 11 days of each other, suddenly it became clear that not having these answers was going to be a problem that was going to be ongoing. And I think the civilian investigations into the police service and its board really changed things in terms of how seriously the mainstream public began to take those questions.
Let me follow up with this, John, because I know in your piece you said nobody wants to use the word crisis. Then your piece appeared on the website, and after that, city mothers and fathers began to use the word crisis in describing the situation there. Is that progress?
Well, it's true that that happened. The other thing that happened within days of that story being published was the mayor and the police chief were arrested for an unrelated incident. And I think that was further pushing the needle on questioning the institutions and their leaders. And I think at that point, the city leaders and the police force began to realize that they couldn't say, quote, business as usual, which is literally what they were saying, anymore.
Let me ask you the same kind of question I just asked Jan, which is, you know, he's been in Hamilton for 4 years. You've lived your life in Thunder Bay. You are a Thunder Bay guy through and through. And of course, as this story has gained legs, there have been media from all over the country that have started to put the microscope on Thunder Bay and try to find out more about what's going on there. What do you think your being from Thunder Bay, though, has added to the way you have been able to cover this story?
Well, I was there for a lot of it, and I think that that the resistance of the organizations that run the city and power in general to have a serious conversation. And so what we did through our analysis was look back over the last few years and demonstrated that this was a matter of resistance from those organizations to admit to and adjust to the systemic racism that exists in those organizations.
Okay, you three, that's 2017. Now I'm going to ask you to look ahead to next year, 2018. Jan, you have looked at wolves. Unsatisfied that that puts you in enough danger, you are now about to look at bears.
That's it. So I decided to head back into the woods. A controversial story. We've covered it on the agenda before, but wanted to get my hands dirty and actually see what this project's about. We know that the spring bear hunt has been extended until 2020. Controversial project. We know that some people would say is great for the economy with tourism and hunters coming into the province, but we know that there are orphaned bears that come out of the spring bear hunt. That's why it was shut down many years ago. And so we'll be able to chat with some orphanages there that have baby bears that say this is not the best thing, and we'll hopefully be talking to some hunters telling me what they see out there as well. Mother
bears come out of hibernation, they start looking for food, hunters accidentally kill them.
That's right. So mother bears typically don't allow their babies to come out with them. It's quite dangerous when they're super young. So, a hunter may not know that, hey, that's a mother bear with some pups.
Okay, Mary, let's go to you next. The Hubs have a partnership with Western University in London, and in the new year, you're going to be working, I gather, on a project with some of their Masters in Journalism students. Tell us about it.
Oh, I'm really excited about this project that's coming up. We're going to be taking a really close and personal look at opioid addiction. We're going to be starting in on the project early in the new year, and the students themselves are going to be defining the approaches, and I'll certainly be helping them along the way.
And John, let's go back to Thunder Bay. The issues that you have been describing for us over the course of 2017 are obviously not going away in 2018. What are you going to be keeping your eye on?
But neither are our institutions going away. And so this state of the poor faith in institutions cannot be maintained. What we're going to be watching is the way that those institutions will recenter themselves. There are a couple of major events happening in 2018, including those investigations from civilian organizations into the police department and its board. The police are doing their best to get out in front of that, and they will be making changes as are recommended. Whether that will be enough for the public to reinvest its faith is yet to be seen. When it comes to City Hall, we have municipal elections coming up in 2018. And I think that that's going to be really exciting in Thunder Bay, because when nobody really knows what's going on, and when there are so many unanswered questions about what's happening in the city, it's going to produce a whole lot of candidates with a very broad spectrum of things that they say that they're going to do.
I know they don't have to declare for several months yet, John, but do you know if the current mayor, who, as you point out, has faced charges, do you know if he's running for re-election?
He has said that he's not going to. we will see what happens.
Indeed. Okay, thanks for that. Jan, we're going to finish up on you because in January, I guess one of the big Happy New Year stories around here for us, not only do we have the 2 existing hubs in Northwestern and Southwestern Ontario, we got 2 new ones coming down the pipe.
We are growing. It's an exciting time. So in January, we'll have 2 new members, one in Kingston covering Eastern Ontario, and one in Sudbury in partnership with Laurentian University that will be covering Northeastern Ontario. So we will be on the grounds covering the rest of the province, and it will be an exciting, exciting time. I'm looking forward to working with everyone. So
pretty much got the blanket out, eh? Got the whole province
That's
covered
it,
now.
exactly.
This is going to be great. Okay. Well, I hope you all have a terrific holiday season. Get a little bit of a break because we're certainly going to put your nose back to the grindstone in the new year and continue to expect those great stories coming out of these various regions of the province that we have come to count on from you 3. So all good wishes to John Thompson in Northwestern Ontario, Mary Baxter in Southwestern Ontario, Jay and Jagannathan, our Ontario Hubs field producers. Hubsters, have a great break. We'll see you in the new year.
You too, Steve.
See you then, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.